Welcome to the 8 Billion Project, where we're on a mission to make an impact by discovering and sharing the purpose of every person on this planet. I'm your host, Liza Florida. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 8 Billion Podcast. I am your host, Liza Florida, and here we are with our continued episodes for Season 5D. I have a very special guest that I'm going to present to you. She is an entrepreneur, international speaker, artist, and mother of two. She started her career in a government office in her native Estonia, and by her mid-20s achieved a level of success mostly known to male politicians at the end of their careers. It was shortly after she and her husband Vishen founded Mindvalley. From a small meditation business that was operating out of the couple's apartment in New York, the company quickly grew into a global educational organization offering top training for peak human performance to hundreds of thousands of students all around the world. She helps her students to virtually hack happiness by taking them through her unique framework. Her personal life is rich and plentiful, if not more, as her professional life. Whether it's singing to her two children to sleep, playing the harp, or going offline in the Amazon jungle, she is set on taking in every moment and invites you to do the same. Welcome, Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, to the 8 Billion Podcast. Truly an honor to have you as a guest today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
We're just gonna say, I would have loved to have you play the harp, right? But we're here to talk about so many different things. There's so much going on in the world today.
Mm.
And when we had our initial conversation, I know a lot of the other work that is asked of you, most especially with what's happening in the Ukraine right now.
Mhm.
However, in light of this season being truly the messaging of leading with love, I know a lot of your work before everything started to happen in Ukraine was heavily geared towards your work. And I do believe you are launching a book, right? Which is The Art of Being Flawsome. And so the mission of 8 billion is to lead with love. And a lot of that work has a lot to do with finding who you are at the core. And it's
Mhm.
a lot about being authentic and a journey to self love. So we are going to concentrate and talk about all of that stuff. And hopefully, whoever comes across it, whether they're in the Ukraine or in the neighboring countries, or could find some messaging in here that gives them hope in in hope for their current situation.
I think that actually my work hasn't changed much. Of course, circumstances have changed, and some of the dialogue is different. And of course, we um, we experience this war on a daily basis. But the idea of leading with love, I think, is as important right now as ever because of the way the things are going and the strong emotions that people are experiencing, which is absolutely natural, of course. Uh, Love is as needed as ever, if not more, right now. So I don't think the essence of the work is very different.
Right. Most especially self love. Well, one of the first things that I wanted to ask you, though, was if someone, you talk, I've seen a lot of your work on stage, and most especially with Mind Valley, and you talk, there is a lot of talk about finding their way back to themselves. If someone, with everything that's going on in the world, what would you say is like the first step that someone can take in finding their way back to themselves?
Well, the first step is in any kind of transformation is, of course, being aware of what's going on. A lot of us live on autopilot, which is probably a normal thing. We need our brain needs some space, so we come up with shortcuts. We come up with traditions and rituals, which is actually good. It's good for our nervous system, but also it sometimes switches off our analytic ability. So we do things as a habit, and I'm not talking about bad habits right now. Actually, even good lifestyle can become an autopilot and lose that awareness and just the pulse of what's going on. So any transformation in life starts with awareness. But when it comes to finding a way back to you, then the most important skill to practice is being honest. And that's a tricky thing and an interesting thing, because as much as I have experimented with the question, how honest are you, well, in general, but with yourself in particular, most people are quite under impression that they are honest with themselves. Well, but that's, I think, the nature of delusion, that we're never aware of of it.
Right.
And in one interview, one of my guests once said a brilliant phrase. He said, a brilliant mind creates a bulletproof delusion. So that lying to yourself is actually not in any way correlated to how smart or aware you are. It's just the way our brain works. So the path back to you starts with absolute, well, I call it pathological honesty with yourself.
Right. That's first and foremost, right? It's the first is truly the awareness. And I've been through such a deep spiritual journey, most especially in the last 3 years. So there, from that point on, it becomes okay, what are going to be things that you could use as practice, right? To start becoming even more self aware and start pulling up, what's buried deep within. Right. I mean,
Mm,
I know for a year, okay, if it has to do with like self awareness, at that point, whether someone is already identified, okay, I'm in pain or I'm in suffering and it doesn't feel good, right? What would be for you like the next step? And I know, I mean, there's so many different ways routes that we can go. I mean, you are the co-founder of Mindvalley. So, and that's heavily built on meditation as it says
mm,
here. But that seems to be sometimes the next step that a lot, because it's quieting the mind to really identify
mm.
what that is. Because at the surface, there's all these things that you're thinking that it is, but there's so much more below the surface.
Well, if we touch upon pain, then that's already in itself such a brilliant topic to talk about, and we could talk about it for a long time. I think the trick with awareness is, why I advocate for it so much, is that it makes willpower unnecessary. And the thing is that willpower is not a very good fuel for transformation. And oftentimes, especially if it comes to health, for example, or fitness, we rely on willpower. The thing is that willpower is an expendable resource. And the annoying thing is that if you expend it in one area, you actually will have the lack of it in a completely unrelated area. So I think awareness is brilliant for so many reasons. Yes, first of all, it does draw your attention to the areas which require your attention. Well, if you live with an awareness, you will notice the pain that requires your any kind of diagnosis, analysis, healing, whatever it requires. But the other thing is that it makes willpower irrelevant, because that's the thing I've noticed over 19 years of working in personal growth and transformation. The moment you are aware of how the things are, you find the internal motivation to change things. And intrinsic motivation is much more durable than willpower. And that's why I think awareness is such a brilliant habit, because you'll just start noticing things. It's not about, oh, I vow that I will start living proper life, but you are constantly conscious and aware of the fact that, okay, this was a bad choice, a poor choice. I actually don't want to live like that. And you start making changes without even putting effort into that, just because you notice what's going on. But I've actually moved into a different topic, because I wanted to say a word for awareness. Do you want us to go back into pain?
No, it doesn't. These are the best podcasts, right, Christine? We talked about this too. We're like wherever the conversations take us. But if you had something to reference to about pain, let's go down that route. I know that there's a huge global uprising of all kinds of pain coming up. So maybe this podcast will definitely help people identify some of that stuff, or give some
Mm.
insight.
Well, the pain that is surfacing right now is a little bit of a different nature, probably. And I wouldn't want us to go into that direction because I think for a lot of English speaking audience, and we're speaking English right now, maybe the topic of war or surviving the war, going through the
I
war,
know.
or having people in your life who are very dear to you who are in that circumstance is maybe a little bit too far away. But when it comes to pain, I think a very great author is Susan David. She's a TED speaker. She's a professor of psychology, I think. And she talks about pain very well. And I like her. I'm loosely quoting her, but her idea about pain, she says, pain is the price of admission to meaningful life.
That's true.
And that, I think, is a brilliant place to start
Yes.
from. Uh, why do I think so? It's because really we have gone through a phase of fascination with not feeling, of non-attachment, of not um, of being above things. I personally have invented a term, emotional analgesia, which essentially means numbing any kind of feelings. But the classic psychology says that you can't numb feelings selectively. So if you numb pain, you actually numb all the pleasure as well. If you numb fear or anger, you numb joy and love in equal shares, because emotions, the way that our capability of feeling emotions is just the same throughout the whole spectrum of emotions. So I think it's a really interesting beginning after this period of our human evolution, where we were so fascinated with not feeling, with not getting attached, with not having expectations, for
Mhm.
example, that we accidentally started numbing our emotions. And if you just admit the simple idea that if you have anything meaningful in your life, it comes with the possibility of pain. If you have people that you love, if you have meaningful, deep connections in your life, there is a possibility of losing those people. If you have meaningful job that you actually care about, it is really hard not to be attached, not to have goals, not to have
Yeah.
certain expectations. Of course, we could discuss how to have expectations without damage to yourself. But pain is actually a price of admission to meaningful life. So if that's the case, isn't it wise to learn to deal with pain, to
Yeah.
know how to feel it properly?
Yes, absolutely. I fully agree. Pain became the gateway for me to begin to heal. And it was the awareness. I don't even think it needed to become awareness because I just felt it, right? But it led me down a journey that was absolutely meaningful and brilliant. It's what the reason I sit in front of you today. And
Mm.
it it allows you, depending on the individual, if you would like to take that journey and go further deeper to heal that, it can bring such great rewards to your life. A play,
But
yeah.
I actually think it's not really so much of a choice.
Right.
we, I mean, what's well, I like to compare emotional pain with physical pain, because that makes it's much easier.
Yes.
We are quite aware of our bodies. So why I came up with the term emotional analgesia is because there is actually in in medicine, there is a diagnosis. It's congenital analgesia. And it is the condition where people don't feel physical pain. So they can, for example, they can cut a finger, they wouldn't feel anything, or they can burn, like touch something super hot, and they wouldn't feel anything. So unfortunately, people with that condition, it's a rare condition, but people with that condition, they don't live very long, because what happens is that if your body is not capable of feeling physical pain, then your body starts deteriorating,
Mm.
because you can't pay attention to the areas that require your attention, that require some kind of fixing and healing. Uh, Very simply put, you could touch a burning stove without noticing it, or sit on it, and then
Yes.
your skin will burn, and you don't notice it. But of course, with internal ailments, the body just deteriorates, and people with that condition just die before they become fully grown. So I believe that emotional pain is given to us for the same reason. It's like physical pain. So by saying if you choose to deal with your pain, it's like saying if you burn your finger, if you choose to put some medication on it and heal it, or okay, forget burning the finger, your body will actually take care of it to some degree. But if you break your bone, would you actually have a choice of going and putting the cast on it?
Yeah.
Or would you understand that for you to function properly in the future, you actually need to pay attention to what's going on? So it's exactly the same with our emotional pain. It's given to us not to torment us, but just to draw your attention to the fact that this area of your life requires some kind of fixing and healing.
Yes.
That's all.
No, and I completely agree, and I'm glad that you brought that up. And the reason that I chose choose, and maybe the best, and I would actually follow that with up with courage, is because a lot of people, and I'm noticing this, and most especially circulating the spirituality world right now, and healing, is that everyone's numbing their pain. Right? There's people are turning to alcohol, people are turning to so many different substances, or they are covering it up with so many different things, like the fulfillment of chasing your career and making so much money. But
Or
you
actually even, exercising
Yeah,
excessively, running
exactly.
away into
Yeah,
that, or
exactly.
meditating without stop.
Or meditating. Yes, and it's true though, Christina. I've seen people even in this industry have gone completely the extreme direction, right? Like it's so they get the high off being so enlightened that it's a little way up there. And I even have to admit that there are times that when I was going down this journey and I was like flying high in spirituality, that sometimes it was so hard to come down. And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of do have a body. Oh yeah, I have bills to pay. I have a career. I have children. I have a son to raise. So it does. There's extremes on both
Do,
ends.
do you mind if I reframe that actually? Because it's not, in my opinion, it's not really going so much high up as running away from life the way it is.
Yeah.
And actually coming down is actually, it's about stopping to hide and coming out back to life and experiencing it the way it is.
Yeah. No, that was a great reframe though. Now, okay, let me then ask you, if we can move from that place of pain, and I'm going to redirect it going back to awareness, right? I like I told you, I've seen so many of your talks, most especially in Mindvalley, and another thing that you talk about is authenticity. So awareness, let's see if we can jump from awareness to authenticity. How would you say that the two correlate with each other, if there is a correlation? Or I'd love to get your view on that.
Oh, I think awareness is the stepping stone to any kind of transformation, because you can't change unless you're aware that you want to change something. Otherwise, you're just floating somewhere around with the current, which is probably also okay if that's your thing. Authenticity. I have actually never looked at it in a pair. For me, they're it's so interesting. It's such an interesting question. I don't even see the correlation between that, but um if we wanted to go into authenticity, it is definitely connected to honesty, because authenticity cannot exist without your honesty with yourself. And I did throw honesty as the next thing after awareness. So I guess that would be the progression. You're first aware, you notice what's going on. Then, if you have the courage, you
Yeah.
might learn to be honest with yourself. Courage. And actually, another thing, which is maybe not so obvious, but kindness, because
Yeah.
kindness makes honesty much more palatable. Then the next step is authenticity.
It's authenticity. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, because like I've told you, of course, before having this interview with you, I watched a lot of your videos, and you heavily spoken many times about authenticity. And I know that with the current, like I said, with the current, there's just so many things that are kind of circulating above the surface right now on a global scale, and then you take it down to your more local governments, and then society and culture. There's so many things for everyone to navigate through right now. And
Mhm.
so that's why I awareness, at the base level of everything, it starts with awareness. And that's what you're saying. And then, of course, you start taking the journey, and then you start unraveling and unpeeling things, and it leads to more of living an authentic life. But
Mhm.
there is still a whole journey in between that before you get there.
That's
So I'm so
the
glad that you brought that up, that there's no correlation. I think I was just jumping from pain to let's go back to awareness, and then we'll move into authenticity. But thank you though for actually bringing that up, and plugging in the different processes in between.
I'm sure there is correlation. Just haven't learned about it. But you know what's interesting with authenticity? It sounds like such a popular word, but if you
Mhm.
look into let's say research, right, or even philosophical discussion about authenticity, there is not much. The only definition of authenticity that I could find was it comes actually from anthropology, and it means being true to your original form, shape, origin. So
Yeah.
just being true to your origins, which is so interesting because it's not even about character, not about not even about humans so much. So it's curious how this word is such a buzzword. So
It
many
is a
people
buzz.
talk about it and throw it about, but it's not really universally understood. And yes, there definitely must be a correlation between awareness and authenticity. Probably you can't be authentic without being aware, but you can probably be aware and choose not to be authentic.
Yes.
And I actually don't think that this is the path for everyone. It's when I make my talks about authenticity, or even in my book, I have a warning that authenticity is not a switch. It's not like I have this light switch here behind my light. I can switch it on and off, and then the light goes on and off. Authenticity doesn't work like that. I like to compare it to a parachute or a skydive, more precisely. Once you're out of the plane, so once you've discovered your authenticity,
That's
you
true.
can't pack your parachute back into the bag midway and return to the plane.
Yes.
You're in for a journey. So I would advise people to venture into authenticity only if they're completely ready and aware that it might change their life beyond what they want. Um, and it's like the moment in Matrix, the red or the blue pill.
Yes. Absolutely.
The thing with self-honesty and authenticity is that it's your own relationship with yourself.
Absolutely.
And if I could give you all sorts of ideas and wisdoms and whatnot, it's one thing listening to me and saying, like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And if it doesn't gel with you, it's fine. You'll forget it, brush it off, and move on. A completely different thing is to discover your own truth in the process.
Yes.
That's the pill you can't just throw away.
No. And
You
you
can
can
live with everybody else's truths, but not with your own. So that's a question I want to ask. Do you want to go on that journey? If you want to go on that journey, you have to be okay with the idea that you'll discover your own truth and you won't be able to live with that. You will have to change your life if you discover it.
Yes, that is so beautifully put, and it's so in line with this season's message, and most especially with the mission. And that's why I think I always go back to using the word courage, because it's not like what you said. Once you go down that path, you can't turn back. You can't undo it. You can't pack, the parachute back. And once you but however, when you do find it, there are going to be these moments that are just, for at least for myself, the description for myself have been like these moments of bliss. But on the opposite side of the spectrums, as you discover other things, they're not going to be sometimes these moments of joyful bliss. They're going to be these moments that are kind of like, I kind of want to go under a rock and hide for a while. And so yeah, that becomes, that's been a lot of my journey. But I think
Mhm.
one of the thing has been like, to be just very mindful of giving yourself so much grace, love and
Mhm.
grace, self-love, as you go down that. That's the biggest thing you could do, because the person that's always with you all the time is just going to be yourself. So,
Yeah, that's why I insist that because for me, authenticity is mostly about honesty, and honesty is such an interesting topic because if you study the way brain works, you'll actually discover a lot of little things, how the brain tricks us into a lot of things. So
yes.
it's not, deception is not always a malicious thing. It's very often, well, where the path laid with good intentions takes you. So
Right.
it's an interesting thing, but that aside, I do think that honesty has to go hand in hand with kindness.
Yes.
And yes, courage is necessary, but it's so much easier to be brave if you are also kind. So a very simple analogy would be if you have children, you know how children grow and mature and how they discover the world. They go out, especially when they're small ones, and they look behind their shoulder and they see, oh, mommy is there. If the kind mommy is there, who's always there to support the child, to embrace the child, or be there with the child when the child needs, then the child has the courage to go and explore.
Yes.
And if the mommy is there standing like this, as like, effort is not enough, you have to win. The fear, I was, I was very competitive, which also was paralyzing because I couldn't go and explore things unless I was sure that I would win.
Wow.
So kindness is incredibly important if you want to be brave, because with kindness, it's so much easier to be brave because you know that a failure is also an option.
Yeah. No, that's really powerful though, Kristina. Now, how have you dealt with, I mean, is that obviously you're aware of that? And has that changed in your life now where it's much more different where you do things now and it's not very it's not very competitive or yeah.
Well, I jump into things which scare me. Yes, that I have gotten over. I still don't like competition in little things, in some things. I'm not very good at board games because I need to win. And then I have come up with little cheats to make myself feel better if I don't win. But these are little things. When it comes to life, yes, of course, I wouldn't stop because I'm afraid, for sure. Except, of course, right now there's war, and sometimes I wonder how would I behave in such extreme situation. But for most of us, this is not part of our daily reality. So and I'm also not in rescue services, so I'm not sure about this extreme kind of courage.
Yeah.
I think on adrenaline we all behave different.
Yeah.
But for everyday life, that's the interesting thing. In everyday life, we actually don't risk all that much.
No, we
We
don't.
actually probably risk more when we sit in the car and drive somewhere. But somehow we often behave as if every single step in the daily life is the question of life and death. It's
Yeah.
not. So that's why we're afraid sometimes to give up jobs that we hate, or take risks, or go into a relationship which might bring pain, because we think that everything is the question of life and death. Actually, it's not. But I have been a coward, yes, and I have regretted that. I have been too smart, trying to anticipate the problem before it happened, and then regretted that rather than having the courage to hope for the better. I've done mistakes. I keep doing them. That's the point of life. I think if I stopped doing mistakes, it would be time to die.
Well, you've absolutely lived a brilliant, brilliant life. I mean, and we're still continuing to live it. So it's just an amazing opportunity to sit here with you. Kristina, I know like we brought up in the beginning that you are releasing a book, The
Yes.
Art of Being Flawsome. Now you've gone into this book has not been released yet. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, my editor just wrote to me today and said, "So, when is your deadline?" So we're putting up the last. It's finished. The manuscript is finished, and we've done the first round of editing to that. I actually wrote myself. I don't have a ghostwriter. I'm proud of that. In the
Yay!
new,
I
well, I
know.
mean, in nonfiction, that's not the most common thing to do. So I just wanted, because it's about authenticity. I wanted my quirky third language English be obvious. Third language, I mean, it's my third language that I speak, not the
Right.
first, not the second. Um, and yeah, it's. I hope I will release it before the summer, because it's not completely in my hands. It requires a little bit of, the design and printing and all of that. But the manuscript is ready, and I can talk about that.
Yeah, about the manuscript?
No, I mean, whatever the book is about, whatever you want to ask.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you could just give us the basis of what it's going to contain, The Art of Being Flawsome.
It is. It is actually. I would say. I wanted to say it's a handbook about finding your way back to you. Um, because I do give recipes, but then it ends with a chapter that says that there are no recipes in life. So it would be a little bit unfair to say so. I do give. It's interesting because it is not an autobiography, not at all. Although it might seem like that, but it is literally just an algorithm of moving from being in a race. From be chasing success to actually asking questions about your life, about what makes you happy. It's about honesty. It definitely has chapters on honesty and on kindness. It is about emotional intelligence, not intelligence so much. I call it emotional literacy, because part of the journey is actually facing emotions we are not very familiar with or haven't been told how to feel. So it has a huge chunk on that as well. Yes, and it ends with me very cheerfully telling you there are no recipes in life. You have to figure it out.
Of course, right? Makes you think. That's why you are one of the co-founders of Mindvalley. Now, like Kristina, there have been so many things. You've reached success on so many levels in so many different facets. Between going into politics, right, and achieving the success that most politicians, male counterparts, don't achieve until the latter part, excuse me, of their career, or even being the co-founder of Mindvalley and seeing that success as it continues to even grow as an organization. Now going, of course, into writing books. But what would you say coming out this far has been maybe the biggest achievement for you? I mean, and it doesn't have to be one single thing. It could just be maybe your thoughts on where life is and how you define it for yourself right now.
I'll be very. Um, I won't be very original in saying that, but I truly think, and I truly think that my biggest achievement is my friendship with my children.
Right?
I just love them. They're the best people in the life, and I'm so proud of them for just the way they are. I feel, I, whenever I see them, I feel so smug. It's like, my kids.
Right? It is because in a way that and the reason that I ask this question is because we have been living for many generations in a culture and society that has conditioned us in a way, or I don't even want to say conditioned. It'd be up to the person and how they see it, to keep achieving something, whether it's career goals or whether it's, wealth. And at the end of the day, I mean, like I have a son that's turning 18, and he's going off to college. And I look back at those times and I just look at pictures. I had just looked at a picture this weekend when I got lost with him we got, long story short, I got separated from my family. They ended up in Copenhagen. I ended up redirected to Stockholm. But that posed the greatest gift for me, and it was scary as a single mom. And then I only had a backpack of just like diapers and formula, and I even ran out of that. But I look back now 17 years later, and that was one of the greatest gifts, because sometimes the God, the universe, creator, whatever, whatever you'd like to say, created that moment for me to kind of get me outside of the hustle and bustle of everything that was happening in my life in LA, and put me in a different country. And it was just the most beautiful moment. And I was crying because those are the things. And before you know it, I mean, my son's literally like, this is another
Yeah,
chapter that I'm having to go through. And so they
yeah.
are these little moments, or if you'd say original, that do make for happiness.
Well, I am saying it absolutely selfishly. Yes, I know we've created a big company, and I'm writing a book, and of course there are all these attempts to leave a mark in the world. But I'm very selfish saying I'm enjoying hanging with my kids.
Yeah,
It's such a blessing, and I know it's such a fleeting moment. So, but everything in life is fleeting.
it
Youth is
is.
fleeting, and well, hopefully health isn't, but who knows. We become different, a little more heavy in terms of movement, as in not as spontaneous. um, Everything's fleeting. So can I, at this moment in my life, I still am blessed to enjoy the company of my kids, and that's my biggest pride right now. I just love hanging with them.
I
And I know I do a lot of other serious things.
that and then play the harp. See, these are the things. So I just wanted to let the audience know that it's true. Like, we we have to take these moments of stillness and then maybe awareness and take ourselves away from the hustle and bustle of trying to achieve these these goals. And don't get me wrong, they are there for us to achieve, but it is these small moments that we have with our families and these present moments, because the life is very fleeting, and these moments are. And that's really the mission of really 8 billion, is to like really anchor in love. It's just being love in, I know this is going to sound very woo woo and spiritual, uh but it's us being love at every moment that we can, and being present. And I know, Kristina, you talked about that in a recent post on Instagram, was that, how do you deal with like hate and anger? But still, like, you can have all of that and you can feel those emotions, but at the very core of everything is just love. So,
Well, we actually didn't even go into emotion so much. It's yes, it is an interesting question, because for the listeners to understand, I was talking about anger, even hatred, and fear in the context of the war, which
mhm.
are very intense emotions. And when and if you look at it from the point of view of Ukrainian people whose country has been attacked brutally and totally senselessly and without any sensible reason, this kind of emotions can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Overwhelming, and when somebody comes and tells you you have to feel love, it is puzzling, because how can you? And even that biblical idea that, if somebody slaps you, turn another cheek. We are not saints, most of us. We are mostly human. So how do you actually feel? And it's interesting you brought up this post, because for me it was also, and I've been in personal growth for 19 years, but for me it was also an aha moment when a lady in my interview, she just said that, yeah, I am not asking you to love your enemy, the person who's attacking your country. What I'm asking is there anyone in your life that you could love? Could you for a moment just stop and concentrate on that love, just for a moment,
Yeah.
just to increase that emotion? I think it was such a human way of approaching that, so much more accessible.
Mhm.
And I actually go even further. Of course, with love, if you have someone to love, it's great. And we all must have at least something to love, or someone to love, even if
Right.
it's just a potted plant. But if it's hard to love, because for some people it may be hard to love,
Mhm.
try kindness.
Yes.
Kindness is a really nice substitute to love, and it does the job, because it's hard to love someone who has hurt you, who has wronged you.
Mhm.
It is hard. And I'm not going to pretend. Yes, maybe somebody who's saint can do that, but most of us can't. And if you pretend that you do, you're actually, from the psychological point of view, you're probably damaging yourself by not acknowledging emotions, which are actually there. Um, but kindness is something which you can feel even towards yourself. If you can't love yourself, try kindness
Yes.
for a change. You can be kind to yourself when you're making a mistake. You can be kind to yourself when you have been less than perfect.
Yes.
You can be kind to a person you don't like, to a person who you actually hate. You can still show kindness by not lashing out, by not revenging, by not being, I don't know, by not being aggressive.
Yeah.
Just let that person be. Show kindness by being philosophical, by walking away.
Yes. I absolutely agree. Kindness. Because then when I started the mission too, I was like, it's all about love. It's all about love. And then in one of my interviews, she's like, well, let's say for like in not everyone has that capacity right now, just depending on where they are. And we've all been in that place. And she was like, yeah, trying kindness and compassion. Those are that next level emotions that we can at least go to and just redirect the energy field or redirect, excuse me, the focus. So I'm glad
Mhm.
that you actually shared that, Kristina. I mean, these podcasts are amazing. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, genuinely thank you for being a part of this very special season. And I know, if anything, I always wish you more time in the world so you could spend it with your children, playing the harp and doing things that make you happy. But still, also want to thank you deeply for your contribution to the world in the work of Mindvalley, in the work of your books, in the work of all the organizations that you go and speak on. And I know sometimes this might be on the lighter side, but we're hoping that if anyone comes across this podcast and has been able to be touched by the messaging that Kristina has, that you will continue to support her. Kristina, what would be the best way for anyone to look more into your work if they'd like to learn more about you?
Well, as a co-founder of Mindvalley, I would say, of course, Mindvalley, but I'm one of the many authors there, so you might have to wait for a few months before you see something about me. So Kristina Mand Instagram is where I write personally and most frequently. I try to write 3 times a week. Sometimes I get too busy, so I at least maintain once a week. But that's just me writing. As I said, I don't have writers for my own ideas and philosophy. I prefer to express myself personally, and that's where you'll find the latest about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kristina, for being a part of the 8 Billion podcast. You are always welcome here. Although I know you have a huge platform to voice out everything that you want to share in your educational platform, but you came here to share your message with 8 billion, and truly from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in to this week's episode of the 8 Billion podcast. We will catch you on our next one. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the 8 Billion podcast. If it's moved you in any way, please share your thoughts or give us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. To listen to more episodes, go to 8billionpodcast.com, or to learn more about our mission, go to 8billionproject.com.